Hello. In today's video, we're going to cover the basics of building a category tree. As you can see on my screen, I've laid out the start of a category tree with two parent categories and a handful of headers that you would typically find under those headers. The parents being engine and exhaust, and then the children categories. Now, while building your category tree, before you even get to this stage, it's important that you research some of your competitors. You want to take a look at some of the big dogs in your market, as well as comparable players. While reviewing their sites, there's a few things you should take into consideration. One, the depth and the scope of their category tree. If you're looking at a competitor that sells hundreds of thousands of different products, while you only plan to sell a handful or a fraction of that, that should really influence how you build your category tree. With that being said, when looking at comparable players in your vertical, you also want to see the subtle differences between what they're doing and what some of the top dogs are doing. Because as you build your category tree, you don't only want to cater to where you are today, but where you want to be. You'll notice when shopping, sometimes even the subtle list of changes can be the most infuriating. That rings true when you're shopping in person, when you go to a grocery store and an item where is typically in this aisle is now located in the completely different side of the store, and you find yourself pacing up and down every single aisle looking for it. The same thing happens online. You change one subtle thing and it can have the same effect. One of the beauties of online is that you can have different structures all in the same store. You can have different avenues leading to the same products, allowing you to cater to what customers are familiar with. Using automotive as the example, you might have a customer that has a particular vehicle and knows exactly what type of part they want. They're either going to use a search engine or they'll generally dive in using a year, make, model widget and getting down to the products that fit their vehicle almost immediately. Then you also have the type of person who just shops by type of product, and then once gets to the correct categories, sees the products that they're looking for, then takes the time to input the year, make, and model. Now, thankfully, you have the option to cater to all these different styles. And when you're researching your competitors, find out what is familiar to your user base. Ultimately, you want a shopping experience that's not just comfortable for you, but for them, and something that they're familiar with so they don't get infuriated while looking for their products. Now, I started with such a basic start to a tree for an example. Now, with this, you have to take into consideration the functionality of your site. Does the platform have left-hand navigation, where you can add attributes, where you can filter down the products that remain in a category? Are you going to have access to an attribute widget where you can input your year, make, and model? These things influence how you build your category tree. I'm going to jump over to the same example, but introducing diesel year makes. As you can see here, I've entered in a Chevy GMC Duramax, and then some of the typical year ranges you'll see for these diesel engines. Now, keeping to just the same engine and exhaust, you can see how even entering a few of the year ranges, only going back to 04, I have now landed at over 100 categories. Now imagine having all of the parent categories and not just covering Chevy and GMC, but doing Power Stroke as well as Cummins. That will easily expand your category tree into the thousands. Now, not to drive you away, there's a reason why people do this. It's very familiar shopping experience. It's a very easy shopping experience. It also cuts down on returns, because the person is drilling down to exactly the correct products for their vehicle. In addition to building the fitment or the year, make, model into the category tree, sometimes, depending on the platform, there's additional benefits that should also be taken into consideration. Sometimes attributes, such as year, make, and model, you don't have the ability to associate images to them, but a category you typically do. So if you want a very visual shopping experience from the year, make, model down to the part type or the category, then it might make sense to bake them into the category tree. Now, with that being said, you drill down to the bottom of this, you'll notice what almost looks like a clear copy paste of the first category tree I showed you at the beginning of this video. Now, there is a reason why I did this. Now, as important as it is to have the shop by vehicle, it's also important to just have a shop by products or shop by category structure. And one of the main reasons is you're running a banner on your homepage or a call to action where you're having a promotion on, let's say, bearings. If you solely have a vehicle-driven tree, you have to choose which bearings category you want to link the customer to. As you can see, just even in this example, I have a handful of bearings. And now instead of catering the banner just to a certain engine, just to a certain year range, it's beneficial to have these more generic part type categories. With that being said, you also want to make sure that if you take this approach, you do have access to an attribute widget such as year, make, and model, as you don't want the returns that would be associated with someone just going engine bearings, adding the cheapest product to their cart. Now I've done this same example using a non-automotive example that I think most people are familiar with, and that's apparel. When shopping a site, they generally start off with a few parent categories, such as, well, in this case, the parent category is actually apparel, but for the sake of this example, we'll do men and women. Men, women, children, toddlers, whatever market or whatever type of customer they're focused at. Now underneath those, you'll find children categories. And typically between men and women, there's a lot of similarities. Shoes, shorts, jeans, fashion tees, accessories, but there might also be differences such as dresses and skirts, polos, button-downs. There's a lot of different categories that are very gender focused when shopping online. With that being said, even though you're starting with men and women, you might also want to have just the categories without that, or almost flipped around. For the same exact reason as I listed before, where if you have a link, let's say it's spring and you want to focus on outerwear, you want to be able to link people to outerwear, an outerwear category, and then let them drive down by men or women. The same exact thing, again, applies to automotive. Now, the only difference here is you see I didn't build out the year, make, and model in these categories, and I could have, but I'm building this category tree out under the assumption that I also have access to an attribute widget that lets the customer input their year, make, and model. Typically on an apparel site, you don't have that functionality. And although it would help drive the person down to the right customer, it's just something they're not familiar with. And that's really what you'll find in your research is what are customers familiar with. And then you cater your category tree to them. With that being said, this covers the basics of building a category tree. Again, one of the things in the utmost importance is to research your competitors, looking at what do you like, what don't you like, realizing that one size does not fit all while shopping, finding out those different avenues that you can lead person down to the same exact product. And also taking into consideration functionality that your platform affords you. Your make, model, can you even do dual category tree? Do you have access to left-hand navigation? These are all questions you should ask yourself before investing time in building out your category tree.